To continue with growth and development, I'd like to ask the candidates, where is the balance between rapid growth and responsible development? Where do you draw the line? And why don't we start with you, Mrs. Dickey?
One of the things I strongly support is sustainable development, such as mixed-use facilities, mixed-use developments, even out in the growth areas. I think that's really important. I think that's something that we can be doing to help strike that balance. I think that as the city grows, that we need to make sure that we're reserving spaces for parks, open spaces, green spaces, and making sure that we are including those into our developments, that the city is looking for that property. I know there's not a lot of it left. Just some of the dealings I've had with parks and some of the discussions we've had on the Parks Foundation, I understand that. But I think it's really important that we're looking as we're developing, as we're growing our residential areas, that we're looking at something other than maybe just the standard subdivision, that we look at some of the alternatives, and we're including those into the plans. And I think that can help kind of quell the sprawl that can happen if we're not doing that. Definitely, I think that we should also be including into our development plans. I mean, we don't have a lot of control over what a developer will do as long as they're working within the zoning regulations, but I certainly think we can be encouraging developers to provide those things.
Councilor Bennett.
Can you say it again?
Sure. Where is the balance between rapid growth and responsible development? And we're wondering where you would draw the line between those two extremes.
Yeah. Thank you. I thought that's what I recalled you asking. Yeah. I think in Salem, and that's the ground I'm familiar with, we are confined by the urban growth boundary. And I am absolutely convinced that within that urban growth boundary is where development should occur. What worries me most is the potential to create pressures inside that boundary by seriously restricting opportunity to the point that we see what happened a couple of years ago happen again, which is the people of Oregon vote to kind of blow that apart and let people start developing sort of wherever they want. And I think the genius of our land use planning process is that we have determined where those urban areas are going to be, and that we're going to protect farm and forest land from that kind of sprawl. I mean, I have to start from that presumption. That means then that places like Salem are going to be where the growth is going to occur. And I chose to live in an urban area. I chose to accept that there's going to be an urban level of development. But I think inside that, there also is a responsibility as we're developing out into that we develop it in a way that guarantees that that land base is preserved and developed for as many years as possible. We're required to have certain years of various kinds of land. In other words, you don't turn over this valuable urban land to sprawling McMansions on 5 acres. You don't give up 5. You start talking about lot sizes that are realistic, that guarantee you'll have housing, that you don't just helter-skelter create major commercial developments where there is a lack of transportation. And in my mind, a good example of that is the development out on Kubler Road that was approved by the Planning Commission and Council. There's I believe, a substantial lack of transportation infrastructure out there that is going to create a substantial amount of pressure on those local neighborhoods through infiltration of traffic and other things, I think, that result. And I think that's when people really feel the pressure of growth. It's when your streets don't work, your bridges don't work, there appears to be a constant destruction of just a basic natural environment around you, and then it sits idle. I can't think of anything more galling than to live in a part of town where someone has come in and bulldoze the place, put in the curbs and streets, and nothing happens for several years. You start to develop questions about, is this sustainable growth or is this rampant and speculative growth? And I think that it's finding that kind of balance. I actually believe here in Salem, we've done a very good job of trying to find that balance. And I know there are parts of town and people from parts of town that would disagree, but overall, Salem has only been growing at a rate of about 2%. Unfortunately for South Salem, far South Salem, and parts of West Salem, the 2% is really happening in their neighborhoods, and I certainly understand the pressure. I live in a part of town where the growth occurred about 1938, you know? And so it has its own set of problems as time changes, and they're not the ones that result in people expressing concern about rampant growth. They express a lot more concern about deteriorating streets and cracking sidewalks and destruction of street side trees.
Thank you. Mr. Chapman.
As someone who worked for the Land Use Planning Agency for many years, I'm a full supporter of that planning process and protection of resource lands and allocation of lands inside of urban growth boundaries for urban development. And Salem has had a very ample urban growth boundary and continues to have an ample boundary in terms of accommodating growth. It seems to me that the real focus has to be on what kind of growth that is, and things like protecting green spaces in areas where you can that aren't especially buildable, and making sure that we've purchased parkland and we can develop that parkland appropriately is an important part. The other piece that I think is very important is that we need to start looking more at the intensity of urban development and building centers. The Transit District is currently in a process of identifying centers in Kaiser and in South Salem, which would be a center for transit to work, and we'd have small neighborhood buses going out and then much more regular service downtown. But those things will only be successful if they are surrounded by a really good mixed use kind of development, mixed commercial uses, so many commercial activities could take place at that center. And if you have that kind of a commercial center and a good transit system there, then more intense development will occur of apartments or condos or things, 2 or 3 story, not huge monsters, but more dense development can occur in those vicinities, and allow the urban area to accommodate more people and a better lifestyle and a diversity of lifestyles for folks in our community.
Okay, thank you.